With the boundaries of all of our edge loops established, it's time for us to start exploring how we can connect all of these independent loops to one another. If we look carefully at our mesh here, we have some really great circular loops, and we need to explore how we're going to take those circular loops and connect and combine them with the rectangular structure of some of these other boundary loops itself. Now, to describe how I'm going to do this, I think what I'm going to do is that I'm going to make a new circular loop, I don't know, right here on this shoulder blade, just so we have a nice little palette to work with. And just very quickly, I'm going to create a circle. Just laying down some little green control dots here with the quad draw tool. Just real quickly. That way we can see that a technique and two possible solutions inside that technique for connecting the circles into the rest of my mesh. And let's just pretend for illustration purposes that that is circular. And actually, to be all honest and fair, I think this is a great illustration of a major point. Don't freak out and don't try to make it perfectly circular. It's never going to be perfectly circular. Just go for it being close. And this is a great illustration of it just being close, okay? If you could spend hours evenly distributing all of these circles, and it's not going to make a difference. The audience is never going to be able to go in and very finally see the difference between a perfect circle and something that looks like this. So when we're working with circles and connecting them into the rest of the mesh, there's a couple ideas that we want to follow here. And the big picture idea is that we're going to be connecting this into a grid. A circle has to be connected into a rectangle of polygons. For the most part, the topology of our mesh is going to be one gigantic rectangle or a series of rectangles. So how do we punch a circle into a rectangle? Well, let me show you one possible solution. Having these north, south, east, and west lines inside of the structure of the circle is really helpful because it gives us some landmarks that we then can extrude out. And it's simply this. I'm going to hold down the tab key, and I'm going to start here at the top. There's two polygons up here that define the peak of our surface. I'm going to hold down the tab key, and I'm going to extrude them upwards. And then, of course, weld the center lines of those two inverts. We're going to do the exact same thing down below. Hold down tab, extrude the bottom ones out. Weld the center line. To see a pattern, these went straight up, these went straight down. These that define the center line of the right side, I'm going to extrude out towards the right in a perfectly straight line. Same goes for these guys on the left. There we go. Now it kind of looks like a flower, which is a good visual representation of what I've made. Now this is a great way to start the process of connecting this into the grid. The problem that we have to overcome in this particular moment is what to do with these corners. And there's two solutions that we have in front of us. We could certainly do this. We could weld the existing verts together into a diagonal line. This is a great way of working. In every sense, what this does, it continues the radial structure of the interior loop, which is totally cool. This is a great way of working. I do this all the time. And sometimes I even do this, where I pull the corners so they just kind of match the outside edge. And now we have a shape that generally looks rectangular. This is a great way of working. I do this all the time. Another alternative that we have, let me just hit undo, is to extrude these edges like this. I'm going to hold down tab, and I'm going to create a new polygon. And what this allows us to fundamentally do is to create a 4x4 grid. A 16 polygon grid, excuse me. Something like that. Yeah, there we go. And that is another great structure for connecting our circles into the larger loop structure of our mesh. Let's go and do it. Let's apply that idea and that concept over here into the head. Now, keep in mind, we have a center line, and that center line is going to be really, really important. I want to have that center line connect back to its friend down over here. If you can create this one gigantic boundary, it gets a little bit easier to fill in the field, as they say, as we go into the rest of our mesh. Okay, now in order for me to have a center line, I'm gonna have to make these polygons around the nostril just a little bit smaller. And that's okay. It's gonna get kind of tight around the nostril, especially if you desire a center line as I do. Let's extrude this shape down, and of course, I'm gonna have to really begin to taper it to get the shape that I'm after. Part of the process, like I said, it's gonna get tight. Something, oh, I don't know. That will do lovely, as they say. I like that. Lovely. Okay, cool. I'm liking that. There's my center line. Now I need to have this edge here connect down to that edge there. There we go. And now I have one loop of polygons that defines the total sum boundary of my model. Let's start cleaning it up a little bit here. It's getting a little bit difficult for me to understand how all these polygons are working together, so now is a good time to make some adjustments. Make it easy on you. You don't get any bonus points for making it hard. There we go. Okay. Something like that. Okay, I'm happy with that. That's a good place. That's a good place to continue on. Now let's start looking at how we can start establishing a connection between all of these boundary loops and that big loop that goes around the center line of our mesh itself. Now we have some decisions that we need to make for our eye. Before we go any further, let's be good stewards of our technique though and begin to make that little flower pattern that we saw before. There's the tops, there's the sides, here's the bottoms, and of course the inside one's going to be a little bit of a difficult thing to do at the moment, mostly because of its proximity to that center line edge, and that's okay. When working with circles, before you go any further, before you do anything else, make that little flower pattern, or in my mind it kind of looks like a flower. So be a good practitioner in connecting all this stuff together. It gets a little bit easier. Okay. All right, so now we got to make a decision here. How do I want to connect these polygons to each other? Well, I certainly could go in and bridge the gap like that. That's cool. That's a great way of working. However, what's it? The solution that's going to produce, as you can see, are really thin polygons, which we don't want. We want to have pretty big chunky polygons for the most part. So I'm just going to weld the verts. Yeah, now I got to make a decision here. Those two inside ones are easy. Yep, I think I'm just going to do that. Same with its neighbor down here. Yeah, I think that's going to work just fine. Just be consistent. The top connects to the middle line. The bottom also connects to the middle line. It's all about patterns. There we go. All right, I'm happy with that. Now, I think for this guy, I'm just going to extrude it out. Weld the verts. Same with its neighbor down here on the bottom. And we can start to explore how we're going to connect this to the nostril. Okay. So I always start with the eyes and the nostrils, and in this case, I'm also going to get the ear kind of defined, and then we'll figure out how to connect all the rest of these stuff, if you will, here in a moment. The nostril, we're going to do the exact same thing that we did earlier. So we're going to weld the verts. I'm going to bring this one over just ever so slightly. Let's make that flower shape again, just so we don't get lost in the geometry. It's really easy to get lost. So make it easy for yourself. Make the structure first, and then figure out how to connect it to the rest of the shape. If you try to do it kind of live in person, it's going to cause some problems. And it's going to take a lot longer. And trust me, you are going to get confused. Be slow. Remember the pattern. Now, at on the eyeball, one of the things that we did is that on the two polygons that we extruded up from the top, we connected that leftmost vert to the center line. So I'm going to do the same thing for the nose. Here's one of the two that we extruded up. Its leftmost vert, boom, it's going to get connected to the center line. Same with its friend down there. There we go. And much like we did with the eye, let's extrude out the corners, merge the verts. Go. And we're on our way. It's getting a little tight down there at the bottom, but that's okay. That's gonna happen. We're gonna fix that here in a minute. You can start to see the importance of that center line. In every sense, it kind of is a major determining factor as to how some of this this geometry is connected back into the scene itself. Okay, so let's get the ears in here. And the ears, let's find the orientation here. So here's the south pole, here's the north pole. So that means if this is the south, this is the east, and this is the west. Yep, because there's one line in between. Let's go ahead and start creating that flower pattern. Give yourself some visual landmarks before you go any further, so you're not confused as to how all of this is going to get connected to each other. Now, I think for me, what I'm going to do, yeah, so this is the side. See how it already kind of got twisted? That's okay. That's going to happen. We want it to get twisted, but if we're kind of on top of it, there we go. Now we have that flower pattern. This one looks really funky, so I'm going to try to make it look not as funky. And I think a lot of my visual problems right now has a lot to do with just the layout of my mesh. I love working with the quad draw tool because I can just very quickly go in, and I mean very quickly go in and readjust the location of a lot of these verts. And I love how it just snaps to the scene. Makes it pretty fantastic. All right, I'm digging this. This is a great start. Now let's explore some solutions here. Well, I know that at the top here, we're going to need to connect these verts to something, right? And it looks like we already have some geometry laid out that will facilitate the natural bridging of these elements. I don't think I need these polygons in here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to drop the tool. I'm in my polygonal selection set. I'm just going to select them, Control Delete to get rid of those things. Let's run back into Quad Draw, and I'm just going to weld the verts. Like that. There we go. Now, did that give me the solution that I'm after? Well, I need some place for this to get welded into right here. I don't want to take it down way over there. That's a huge stretch of the polygon. So I think what I'll do, I'm going to hold down the Control key on my keyboard, and that's going to fire off the loop slice command. And I want to put a new loop right there, which is going to allow me a connection point for that corner. Let's see if I do that. Is that going to work? I don't know. Let's see. Maybe it's best if I did that. Now, if I did that, yeah, I would need, yeah, and this is where the puzzle comes in, because check it out. I have one loop that is going to need to go all the way up over here. I think probably what I should do as an alternate idea is to place another loop there. That way, that guy's got a connection point. This guy's got a connection point. This guy has a connection point. We'll add a new polygon in here. This is the cool thing about multi-cut or quad draw. Hold down Shift. It's going to add a new polygon, and then another one right there, and right there. And really, the solution up here at the top, yeah, it's kind of a weird shape. I'm not loving that shape. I'm not loving that shape. We don't have a loop. I want this to go up a little bit. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to restructure this just ever so slightly. I'm going to go back and hit undo. This is part of the process, and I'm happy that you saw me go through this process, because sometimes you take it one step forward and then you kind of retopologize yourself into a corner. So I've just hit undo a number of times here, and I'm going to drop the tool, select that corner polygon, and delete it. Let's jump back into Quad Draw, and I'm going to start connecting these things in again, just like I did before, but I want to explore a little bit a potential structure. Remember, I'm trying to be as mindful as I can with the flow of polygons. It's flowing backwards. It's flowing backwards. So this guy, does it need to be done there? Maybe. Something like that. Perhaps. Yeah, actually, I think if I look real carefully, I don't need that edge in there for the moment. I'm also going to delete that polygon, run back into quad draw. Yeah, because I want my flow to be going this way. And I just did something that I didn't like. When I extruded it out, the size of the new polygon was too big, and it snapped to the wrong location. And that's going to happen quite a lot. Okay. This edge in here is already giving me some issues, so I'm going to delete it. It's forcing me to add a new loop in there, which I don't want. So let me just go into edge mode. Double click on that guy, Control Delete to get rid of him. Let's go back into quad draw. Yeah. Now we have something that we can work with, excuse me. Because now I can do this. I can just bring that edge up. I'm going to add in a new loop here with the Control key and start welding these things together. All right, that's looking pretty good. I'm happy with that. It's a really, really great place to go. This is the problem-solving kind of workflow that you have to go through. There is no instructions on how to do this. We just have problems that we need to overcome. And these strategies hopefully will help guide you through this process. Remember the flow. We're trying to go from the front all the way to the back. I like to think of the polygonal flow like raindrops falling down a windshield. We want them to try to go in straight lines. When they curve, that means there's a change in slope in that area, and that's okay. The ears are a change in slope. The eyes, a change in slope. We want to make sure that we're defining those changes in slope with as many polygons or with as many poly loops, excuse me, as we can. All right, just real quickly, let's see if we can just kind of finish this up here a little bit. I can already start to see some natural connection points in here in the cheek. That's a natural connection point. Let's finish the connection of this loop into its neighbor down over here. Now, would it be of benefit to the model? I missed the jaw. Would it be of benefit to the model to connect that polygon like that and that one right there? So in every sense, this edge is going to define the jaw. I don't think it will. And the reason it's not going to is that these polygons here have no place to flow downwards. So what I'm going to do, slight change in plans. There we go. Something probably like this. Yep, let's add a new edge in there. That way I got an extra one. Now I have a place for those guys to connect, these guys to connect. Are you starting to see why we wanted to work with as few polygons initially? Because now we're starting to fill in the details of the puzzle, if you will. Okay. Now you're almost always going to have a corner here in the cheek. It's by design. That's going to happen. And it's a good thing to have because that's going to have a real planar point right there at the cheek. And in characters, especially human beings, that's a natural conclusion for the deformation of the smile. So let's just do this real fast. I want to bring these loops around. And I think for this one, what if I was to make it a loop that looked like this? See how the corner, it's not a grid, it's a circular loop. Let's just see what happens. Sometimes you gotta experiment with this stuff. Sometimes it works, you know, and other times it doesn't work. And I got lucky. It worked that time. Now, in order for me to take these loops across the forehead and going back down this way, we're going to need some additional structure. We're going to need some additional geometry. So we need a loop there, there. Let's see if that worked. Yep. And then this one, yeah, we'll go there, there. I think I may have modeled myself into another corner. Solution is real easy. I'm going to get rid of that corner guy that we were talking about before. Let's just get rid of him. Let's go back into quad draw. Because check it out, I can now go downwards that way if I wanted to. Yeah, I think that's going to work just fine. It creates an n-gon in there initially, but we can fix that n-gon. We can fix that n-gon with some multi-slicing. Okay, and I think this is a great illustration of why we like having all of these tools in here, because we can very quickly start to slice like this. And I think I did the wrong ones, excuse me, because I need to connect this one. It should be, I need to cut right in here. I'm gonna grab good old multi-cut real fast and cut from edge to edge. Go back into quad draw. And oops, I missed a piece, I'm sorry. We want to go from there this way. And then we'll also cut to the corners like that. There we go. Now we have a structure in there that will work. Kind of creates a nice little bend in the jaw as well. And we have some polygons in here that we can start slicing to or connecting to each other. Like that. Hopefully you're starting to see why I made the suggestion of keeping all of your geometry and all of these initial loops very chunky and huge at first, because we're starting to go in and radically change the form of this shape based off of that of what's required of the face. When we first defined these loops, we didn't know what was required. Well, now we're starting to. Now we're starting to. Okay, let's figure out this last little bit here in the nose. If you do research online and look at people's polygonal flow and their structures, you're going to see a lot of creative solutions. And that's a good thing. Everyone's going to have a slightly different take on the puzzle itself. All right, I have a challenge here that I now need to overcome, and I don't know the solution off the top of my head, but it's an illustration of something that we need to be mindful of. I'm working on the nose, and I have a whole series of new edge loops that come from the nose that need to be sent somewhere. If you look at the edges, there's an edge here, and I could do that, okay, to start creating a new structure. Excuse me, there it is. Could also have to do that as well to start connecting those. That's okay. That's not necessarily a bad thing, right? However, we're adding more polygons and we're sending more polygons to the back of the bear. That could be a little bit of a challenge. So maybe there's some other opportunities in here that we need to look at. Some opportunities that will allow us to change the flow of this to get what we're after, but to send the polygons maybe back onto themselves, to create some more defined loops to prevent as many polygons flowing from the nose, where there's 8, all the way to the back. And you know, really the solution could be simply we have too many polygons around the nose. Maybe 8 is too many, maybe we need 6. I hesitate very directly to reduce the number of polygons, but it might make the connection of these loops a little bit easier. We'll talk about that in a little bit.